Now, I think last time we did this Prarabdha Karma also, but I'll just briefly take it up because the Sanchita and the Agami Karma come in the next this thing. We have already dealt with it. Now we are talking about the Prarabdha Karma. The question and answer for this is Prarabdham Karma Kimiti Chet Idam Shariram Utpadya Ihaloke evam Sukha Dukkadipradam Yat Karma Tat Prarabdham Bhogena Nashtam Bhavati Prarabdha Karmanam Bhogadeva Kshaya iti. If it is questioned what is Prarabdha Karma, having given birth to this body, the actions which give results in this very world in the form of happiness or misery and which can be destroyed only by enjoying or suffering them is called Prarabdha Karma. There is a Sharira now. So that means a process is already set in motion. So we have started a process and that process has to be undergone and completed. So when a person is born with a body, he is born with a certain amount of karma, which is some part of it, as we discussed earlier, is predetermined, and the rest of it is progressively, one undergoes the consequences of karma, both the good and bad, both that give pleasure and pain, and in this world only. The karma that is experienced in this world through this body and the several other bodies and koshas and other things, it has to be experienced here. And the statement is very clear, which says that Bhogena Nashtam Bhavati. It will be destroyed only by undergoing that suffering or enjoyment. Bhoga means to undergo the process of it or experience it. So the only way to exhaust Prarabdha Karma, because it is already set in motion and the circumstances are already created for it, and we come with our own vasanas and samskaras and other things, so we undergo that karma and nothing can be done about it, whether even if the person who is highly evolved from a spiritual point of view, and even if it is to be considered as though it were his last life, it has to be undergone. So nobody can take it away. It has to be undergone. And actually, if you see the lives of all great sages and saints, they are not actually, they are not happy. They're not very happy about the whole thing. They undergo suffering, all kinds of sufferings. But the only thing is, it doesn't make any difference to them because they are unconnected or undetached from it. They're totally detached from it. So this is as far as the Prarabdha Karma is concerned. Now we come to the next one, which is an important one in one respect. But there are this particular thing, which the topic which we are going to discuss. See, there is a lot of misinterpretation and misunderstanding about this process, which we need to clarify for ourselves. Because if you go literally by the statements made here, they will be misleading and there is a great chance of misinterpreting the whole thing. Let us see what it is. Sanchitam karma brahmaivahamiti nischitya निश्चयात्मक ज्ञानेन नश्यति आगामि कर्म अपि ज्ञानेन नश्यति किंच आगामि कर्मणां नलिनीदलगत जलवत् ज्ञानिनां संबंधो नास्ति. We will take up this first part of it, then we will come to the other second part of it. Now sanchitam karma, accumulated karma, is completely destroyed once there is that realization and a firm conviction with the not only jnana does not mean knowledge, but it means realization that I am Brahma. Brahmaivaham iti nischayatmaka jnanena nasyati. We'll see the translation. The Sanchita karma is destroyed by the knowledge I am Brahman. This is what he says. Knowledge means, it does not mean intellectual or mental knowledge. Knowledge here means a realization that I am Brahma. I am that ultimate reality. I am that supreme intelligence. The point to be remembered is, here the statement says that the Sanchita karma is destroyed. But the fact of the matter is, no karma can be destroyed. Once somebody has released certain forces, and in whichever form they may be in the seed form, they may be in the form of prarabdha, that is what we are undergoing now, or whether they are yet to come in the future. That means some karma is done in this life, that becomes the agami karma. In fact, that gets added to the accumulated karma and one has to undergo it. But the most important point to be remembered is, a person who has come to a state of realization that I am that ultimate reality, for him most of the sanchita karma is already destroyed. Before coming to this realization itself, it is already destroyed. You cannot assume that suddenly in this life I get that realization that I am Brahman and I am that supreme intelligence and that ultimate reality, and that realization would suddenly destroy all the accumulated karma. It doesn't happen that way. There is a progression in things. Life is a continuity. Let us not break it into this life, past life, future life, and other things. Life per se is a continuity. It is our ignorance which makes us realize, think that the past life is something else and the future life is something else, and I know only this particular life, because you are living in a body. But for a realized person, for a person who is almost on the verge of going into a timeless state, realizing the truth, the ultimate reality, by the time he comes to that realization, most of his sanchita karma is destroyed. So what remains is only a very small balance of it, a very small amount of it, and that gets destroyed, not as though that he does not undergo it. He has to undergo it in a certain form, but it does not affect him in any manner whatsoever. The karma that affects an ignorant person is totally different from the karma, the same karma which a jnani undergoes. This difference has to be very clearly understood. See, there is the great possibility of misunderstanding this statement and thinking that somehow or the other, if I become a realized person here, all the accumulated good and bad karma of hundreds of lives will simply vanish. No, it will not vanish. And to bring further confusion to this, they have added another dimension to say about roasting the seeds of karma. See, sanchita karma is compared to the seed. That means it has not yet sprouted. It is in the seed form. Now, what happens from an agricultural point of view is, if you fry any seed, there is no possibility of sprouting. So there are some references in some of the texts which say that sanchita karma is in seed form. Even in the Tattvabodha, there is a mention there earlier. It's in seed form, and through your jnana, in the jnanagni, in the fire of the jnana, you are frying those seeds, and therefore they become totally, wasted, and there is no possibility of sprouting. That's a misinterpretation of it. The point to be realized is, having come to a state where one is in a position to realize that I am Brahman, by that time itself, most of the sanchita karma is gone. A very limited amount of karma is there. See, last time, if you remember, I mentioned three things from the Buddhist literature also, and from the Vedantic literature also, there is something called as one who has entered the stream. The person who has entered the stream of spiritual progress, he is called as a Srotapanna. Srotas means a stream. Apanna is one who has got into the stream. Now this stream takes you on its own now. The stream is such that without much effort on your part, you progress spiritually towards the ocean of that ultimate reality or that supreme intelligence. But in order to enter this, most of the karma should have been exhausted by then. There is no question of miraculously escaping the consequences of sanchita karma. It doesn't happen at all. This has to be very carefully understood. It doesn't happen that way. That means by the time you enter the stream, you have all the seriousness, all the intent, and all your attention is towards progress. Towards progress on the spiritual path, and most of it becomes effortless. As I said, if it's a flowing stream which is flowing into the sea or the ocean, there is a lot of speed with that. There is a lot of gushing of that stream. So you need to just enter it and it will take you there. So you are already in that state whereby your sanchita karma is very minimal. Then the next stage is what is called as sagadagami or sakritagami. Sakritagami means once returning. That means there is only one more lifetime for you to come and exhaust your karma. From Srotapanna, you go to the stage of Sagadagami or Sakritagami. From Sakritagami, you go to Anagami. That means that would be your last birth, and there is no question of again returning back compulsively into this cycle of birth and death. So by the time you come to once returning stage, by that time most of it, almost 99% of it is exhausted. Only some karmic links which are there. That is why it is said that when a great soul is born, all the persons associated with him in the past lives, good or bad people, whoever it may be, with whomsoever he has a person has the karmic links, they are all born at that time almost in the vicinity of that great man. Buddhist literature talks about this. Buddhist literature talks about it, where it very clearly says that along with the Buddha, thousands and thousands of people with whom he had a karmic link were born, so that it is exhausted once for all in that lifetime, that and finish it off with it. See, the law of conservation of energy is not merely a physical law. It is a universal spiritual law also. The law of conservation of energy says you neither can create nor destroy energy. If you have released some karmic energy, that has to be exhausted through a process. That's all. You neither create energy nor you take away energy. You only dissipate that energy which is in a concentrated form. That means you are converting that energy from one form into another form. That's all. So the law of conservation of energy is a universal law, and it applies on the spiritual plane also. So what is happening is, you have to understand that a person who has entered the stream is just one or two lifetimes away from self-realization of that ultimate reality, that I am Brahman. That stage comes only when one has entered the stream. This is the important point to be remembered. So The mere knowledge that I am Brahman is not going to make any difference whatsoever. Unless you directly realize it, aparoksha jnana, direct and immediate realization of the truth is what matters. Then what happens? Whatever karma you undergo with a total detachment and it has absolutely no effect on you. Whether it's a very big calamity or a small issue or a small thing, whatever happens from a worldly point of view, he is undisturbed. That is the reason why they call such a person as a Sthita Prajna. So a Sthita Prajna has come to, Sthita Prajna means one who is established in Prajna. Prajna is that ultimate reality. Prajnanam Brahma is a Mahavakya. So one who is established in that Prajna, for him nothing is of any consequence from a worldly point of view, nothing disturbs him. So do not assume that suddenly one can become a self-realized person in one lifetime here and that all the Sanchita karma will simply vanish. No, it will not happen. You would have undergone them in several lives and you have come with a minimum baggage here now. And that minimum baggage will be exhausted once for all. Right. Now the second statement, agami karma api jnanena nashyati kincha agami karmanam nalinidalagata jalavat jnaninam sambandho nasti. He says agami karma. This is a future karma which is a consequence of the actions of a particular lifetime in which the prarabdha karma is. See, you are not only exhausting the prarabdha karma, but you are also doing some new karma, which again results in some effect. You are generating certain causes here, and the effect has to be undergone. So that effect is what is called as the agami karma. He says agami karma is also destroyed through jnana, through that self-realization. But the agami karma for a jnani is like a drop of water on the lotus leaf. That means he is totally detached from it. It doesn't affect him in any manner whatsoever. Therefore, he says, Nalini Dalagata Jalavat Sambandha Nasti, which means the Agami karma is also destroyed by Jnana, and the Jnani is not affected by it, just as a lotus leaf is not affected by the water on it. Right? Now, here again, the same logic applies. Having come to a stage where he is just a couple of lifetimes away from self-realization, technically. Let us assume technically we have come to a stage where we have only 1 or 2 lifetimes to undergo and complete this process. You see, please hold in your mind what I have repeatedly been saying, that self-realization can happen only on the fulfillment of 2 conditions. One is purification, 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 purification at all levels. That has to happen. Second thing is exhaustion of karma. Without exhausting karma, you cannot cross over. You cannot go on to the other shore. You cannot go into that dimension of the timeless state of that supreme intelligence. So, purification and exhaustion of karma, this is the only action that is required from our point of view. So, when it is a question of agami karma, there is a possibility that in a particular lifetime, even though we are only a couple of lifetimes away from it, there's a possibility of doing good and bad karmas, good and bad, not necessarily as we understand as bad. A small thought which may not be in consonance with the vibration of the spiritual plane will get attached as a bad karma. See, if you see great songs and poems which the great saints and sages have written, they have lamented in this life, saying that the evil, Papa, is not leaving me. I am unable to get over certain things, and it is only your grace that will take me away from this evil. The point to be understood is they are not doing the same kind of evil as we are indulging in the daily life. I told you the example of earlier in some other context, this example was given where the point is, if there is a beautiful white cloth, a small speck of dust on it also gets magnified. That means the effect of that small speck of a black dot or dust appears as something very big. So for all these great sages and saints who have said that Papa is not leaving me, this evil, I am unable to get over, this means that speck is remaining in their life. See, for a fellow like me, there is no white cloth at all. The whole damn thing is black. So where is the question of any sense of remorse or being sensitive to it and saying that I have evil? I am filled with evil. But compare this with that of a great saint or sage. For him, a speck, a small black dot, magnifies and appears as though it's a great sin or a great flaw in his life. So, what is happening here? Actually, the point to be realized is that they are unable to get over that flaw, and in fact, because of such small flaws only, they have taken birth. Because of such small flaws in them, that means some of the sanchita karma, some of the other karma is remaining, and that's why they have taken birth. If it were to be totally flawless, they would not have taken birth at all. So we see, I have seen this because when people discuss all these things and when people give discourses on this subject, they unfortunately mislead by saying that, you see, that great saint also had flaws in him, but by the grace of God, it has been completely eradicated and he has gone. No, you can't compare a bucket full of muck to a small speck of dust. I have a bucket full of muck. I can't say that somebody will take away the entire bucket for me just because he has taken away a speck for somebody else. So never fall into that trap of thinking that by merely wishing for the grace of that divinity, everything will be wiped off. Nothing will be wiped off. Let us be prepared to undergo whatever karma we have done with equanimity. That is what is required for our purpose. Other than that, it is not possible at all to remove that karma. So, agami karma, as I said, if one or two lives are remaining, in that life, he will be totally unaffected by it. He will be totally unaffected by it. He will be as though it is like a drop of water on a lotus leaf. The lotus leaf does not become wet, and the drop appears like a pearl. You see, Ramana Maharshi used to joke about his cancer. It used to appear like a red wound. He would point out to somebody and say, "Isn't it shining like a beautiful carbuncle, like a jewel? Isn't it, so beautiful?" You imagine. See, it does not mean that the body is not suffering. The body is suffering. Is undergoing pain, but he is unaffected by it, and he is able to joke about it and say, "Can you see this beautiful, what is appearing like a cancerous tumor is appearing like a beautiful jewel?" So that is the beauty of it. So they undergo it, but totally are unaffected by it as compared to any other ignorant person in this world who is terribly suffering with the same thing. There is terrible suffering for somebody, and somebody is there who is totally unaffected. That is the jnana when realization should come. That is the jnana when he is talking about jnana. It is that realization of that ultimate reality. That means, as I mentioned earlier, you have already had a glimpse of that light. That glimpse of that effulgence of that supreme intelligence. We have already had a, he had, a jnani has already had a glimpse of it. Now his direction is fixed and his attention is totally on it. There is nothing to distract him. So he is moving in that direction with tremendous speed now. And the destination is decided. There is no question of not reaching the destination because you have entered the stream. The stream will carry you. In one of the beautiful verses on this vivification of chakras, Adi Shankara says, once the Kundalini reaches the heart chakra, from there onwards the journey is automatic, he says. Anahatad amburuhadudeti swatmavagamya swayameva bodhaha. Once it reaches the Anahata chakra is the heart chakra. Anahatad amburuhadudeti. From there it is like a blooming lotus. And swatmavagamya swayameva bodhaha, the Atma Gamya, the destination or the path and the process of realization is swayameva bodhaha. Nothing else. There is nobody from outside who is going to guide you now. From there onwards, it is automatically, it rises to the Vishuddha, to the Ajna and the Sahasrara. Sarecha Purair Anilasya Kumbhaihi Sarvasu Nadishu Vishodhitasu. He talks about all the purification of all nadis. Purification is the process, as I mentioned. And we are told that there are 72,000 nadis in all the bodies and koshas and everything put together. And out of them, 72 are important. Out of them, 18 are important. Out of them, the 3 are Ida, Pingala and Sushumna. Though they are the most important nadis. But Sarvasu nadishu vishodhitasu. Only upon all the nadis being purified, the Kundalini having risen up to the heart chakra, it rises further on its own and the destination is fixed and you need not make any further effort into it. So that is the meaning, esoteric meaning, which we have to understand with regard to Sanchita and Agami Karma. Let us not imagine even for a second that some external force or agency will simply take away our karma and destroy it. It will not be destroyed and we have to undergo it. And the law of nature, law of manifestation, the universal law of manifestation says, whatever forces, whatever energies we have released into the world, they will come back to us in some form or the other, and we should be prepared for the consequences. And then only, without further adding to the complication, they should be exhausted. This is what it is. Now, another very strange thing is mentioned in this Tattva Bodha. I do not know whether it is an interpolation or whether it is there in the original, if the whole thing has been given by Adi Shankara. But this also has to be understood from a deeper esoteric point of view and not take it literally. Now let us see what it says. Kimcha ye jnaninam stuvanti bhajanti archayanti tan prati jnanikrutam agami punyam gacchati. Ye jnaninam nindanti dvishanti dukkha pradanam kurvanti tan prati jnanikrutam sarvam agami kriyamanam yadvachyam karma papatmakam tad gacchati. Suhrudaha punyakrutam duhrudaha papakrutyam gruhnanti. What does it say? Further, those who praise, worship, and adore the Jnani, to them go the results of the good actions done by the Jnani. Those who abuse, hate, or cause pain or sorrow to a Jnani, to them go the results of the sinful actions done by the Jnani. Those who are friendly acquire the merits, and those inimical acquire the demerits. Now, he is talking about a strange process of distribution of good and bad karma of a Jnani from the point of view of Agami karma. Now, this is strangely what he says is whoever worships him, praises him, adores that Jnani, the good actions, the results of the good actions done by the Jnani go to them. And similarly, the results of the bad actions done by the Jnani go to those people who abuse, hate, or cause pain or suffering to the Jnani. Now, if we take the literal meaning of this, it is as though he is distributing his good and bad karma without undergoing it. No, it doesn't mean that at all. Those who are close to a Jnani, those who have a great reverence and regard for a Jnani, they partake of his knowledge. They partake of his, vibrations. They are in the aura of that Jnani, and therefore they enjoy the merits as a result of being in that aura of the Jnani. And those who deliberately cause hatred or suffering or abuse to the Jnani are actually doing something good to the Jnani because they are taking away his bad karma. They are simply taking away his bad karma. He is not distributing it. Those who are inimical, they take away his bad karma and they suffer the consequences of it in their own lifetime, here or future or whatever it is. It is not the Jnani who is distributing it, or there is no system of distribution of karma as we understand. The only system is, if you are within the aura of that Jnani and have great reverence and regard to him and realize the true nature of that Jnani, you also get purified in that aura. So when you are purified, that purification is happening on account of some good karma you have done, and the good karma of the Jnani and the good karma of those who worship or praise or adore him is matching and getting exhausted for both. Whether it is good karma or bad karma, it has to be exhausted. Those who are in his presence, they acquire some good karma because their entire karma is not yet exhausted. For a Jnani, it is getting exhausted, but for a person who is in that aura, he is carrying some more good karma so that he will be able to lead a better life and a better spiritual life and get into the path easily. Similarly, for somebody who is abusing him, he is actually coming and taking away the bad karma of that Jnani, but in the process, being ignorant, he is acquiring some bad karma. See, Annie Besant used to say that if somebody comes and abuses you or causes suffering or pain, from a spiritual point of view, you should be extremely grateful to that person for the simple reason that on his own he has come and clearing your debt. He has come on his own, isn't it? You have not invited an evil fellow to come to you. Something bad happens, some fellow for unknown reasons causes great damage to me or hurts me or abuses me or does some problem, creates some problem for me. That is an indication that he is doing a great service to me by coming and taking away my bad karma, relieving me of my bad karma. And there is a story about the Buddha also, where a person comes and abuses Buddha. And the Buddha is absolutely in a serene mood and laughing and smiling actually. Then his disciples ask, what is this nonsense? That fellow has come and abused you. He says, I am so fortunate today that the last bit of bad karma, he himself has come and taken it away, and I am free of it now. So that is the meaning which has to be understood here. And it is not as though that the good karma is taken by good people, bad karma by bad people. No. It's not a literal understanding of it is not going to help us at all. It has to be understood that there is a mutual exchange of good karma, but for a jnani, he is not accruing any good karma, but only parting with his good karma, and somebody else is taking that good karma on account of being in his presence. Similarly, a person who is in his presence but who is abusing him or hating him or causing pain or suffering is helping that jnani to be cleared of his bad karma. It's as simple as that. If you go by the literal meaning of what is written here, there is a great possibility of misunderstanding. There's a great, see, some of the greatest saints and sages who were there in the 20th century have all suffered from cancer. Whether you take Ramakrishna Paramahamsa or Ramana Maharshi or Jiddu Krishnamurti, or maybe some others are also there who were almost on the verge of getting rid of all their karma, and their body had to undergo that suffering. Their body had to undergo that suffering and get exhausted and thrown away, because they could have easily healed themselves. All these people had the capability of healing themselves, but they never ventured to heal themselves. They have healed others, but they never healed themselves. There are several cases of others being healed, but they never healed themselves because they knew the law of conservation of energy, and they said this has to be undergone. I have to undergo this karma, and I will undergo with lot of pleasure and happiness. Let it be cleared once for all, because I can't come for this nonsense once again and spend a whole lifetime here. So you see the beauty of it. Pain and a kind of suffering for the body is okay, but essentially they are totally detached from it, they are unaffected by it, and there is no suffering at the emotional or mental or spiritual level for them at all. So that is the meaning which has to be understood in this. Because unfortunately what happens is, just for the heck of it, if I want to gather more and more people and more followers, and I want to give an impression that I am a guru, and by putting my hand on your head, your karma will be taken away, that will be done, this will be done, and all kinds of things will be done. No, it will not happen. Not an inch. Nobody can move an inch of your karma this way or that way. Even the greatest of the kings, the story of Dasharatha also is that they had done some readjustment, not for his sake. They did some readjustment because there was an urgency for an avatara to descend. There was an urgency for the Rama avatara. Actually, they said all the great astrologers and saints and sages in his court told him that you have no possibility of progeny in this lifetime. Now, how did it happen that he became the father of four boys? Because of the readjustment, not on account of satisfying him, but on account of the urgency of the descent of that karma, the avatar of Sri Rama. And further, they told, it seems, Dasharatha, that this is only a readjustment. Somewhere in some lifetime, you have to undergo a period where you will not have progeny. It's only a readjustment and not for your sake. If you are thinking that we are doing this readjustment for your sake, no, it is not being done for your sake. It is only being done for the urgency of the avatara, because of the problem the world is facing on account of Ravana. So you see the esoteric significance of this. Whoever, howsoever great he may be, he is bound by the law of manifestation, and he has to undergo that. This is very clearly to be understood. And see, the first lesson to be learned on the spiritual path is to take full and total responsibility for our actions. Total and complete responsibility for our actions, good or bad. With that knowledge, let us act. Whatever action we do, say from today onwards, from this minute onwards, if we are able to come to that understanding that I will be totally and completely responsible for my actions from this moment onwards, and also willing to happily undergo the accumulated karma, then only there is a quickening on the path of the spiritual progress. Otherwise, we'll be only going in circles and imagining that somebody will come and take away my karma and I'll be free of it and all that and gone, finished. No, it doesn't happen that way. None of these popular people who discuss these subjects want to reveal this truth, because they will lose followers. If this fellow is not going to be of any help to me, why should I follow him? Would be the first question. See, the whole human psyche is such that I want to enjoy benefits for which I am not entitled, and at the same time I want to avoid all the evil consequences of my actions without undergoing the consequences in any manner. Punyasya phalamichanti punyam nechanti manava. There's a beautiful verse which says, Punyasya phalamichanti. I want the fruit of punya without doing punya. Punyasya phalamichanti punyam nechanti manava. Na papa phalamichanti. I don't want papa, the fruit of papa. Papam kurvanti vainara. But I do papa. I will do papa. I will do evil things, but I don't want the consequence. I will not do anything good, but everything good should happen. This is a strange human psychology. If we examine ourselves, we are also living in the same concept. We are also living with the same concept, which is the grossest form of ignorance. As I said, the first lesson is to stand up like a true human being and take complete responsibility for our actions. As simple as that. Half the battle is won. If one stands up with that firm conviction and decision to take complete responsibility for oneself, 50% of the battle is won already. There's nothing more further to that. Further, it is a matter of a process only. But this conviction is what is required. Okay? Then we have almost come to the end of it. The last part of it says, Tatha cha atmavit samsaram tirtva brahmanandamihaiva prapnoti. Then the Atmavit. Atmavit is one who has realized his own true self. Samsaram tirtva, having crossed the ocean of becoming samsara or this world. Brahmanandam ihaiva prapnoti. He will attain Brahmananda, the ultimate bliss, here itself. See, the point is, one has to be liberated in a lifetime only. It is not as though that one becomes a realized person after death. No, it doesn't become. One has to realize in one's own lifetime that ultimate bliss, Brahmananda, having crossed this ocean of samsara. Who? Atmavit. The Atma and the Brahman are one and the same from the Vedanta point of view. So one who has become an Atmavit, one who has that self-knowledge or self-realization of his own true nature, experiences, it's actually a wrong term, experience is a wrong term, but comes to realize or be in a state of that supreme bliss, Brahmananda, and he is the one who has crossed this ocean of samsara. And what does the Shruti, the Veda, the Chandogya Upanishad, there is a statement, Tarate Shokam Atmavit. An Atmavit, that means a self-realized man, a person who has realized his true self, crosses over all sorrow, the ocean of sorrow, the ocean of suffering. He simply crosses over. Tarati Shokam Atmavit is also a Mahavakya actually. It doesn't figure in the 4 Mahavakyas, but there are several other Vakyas which are very important, and this is from the Chandogya Upanishad. I think in the 7th chapter of the Chandogya Upanishad, this is there. So he is mentioning that according to that Shruti, that Veda, the Upanishads are a part of the Veda. So it is a pramana. It is a something which is a definitive evidence or proof that an Atma with a truly self-realized person crosses over this sea of sorrow. Then tanum tyajatu akashyam shvapachasya gruhetha athava. Then it is of no consequence whether that such a person leaves his body either in Kashi or in the house of a dog eater. Shvapacha means a person of a very lowly nature. It has nothing to do with caste or community, please. It has nothing to do with caste or religion or community or anything. A person of a lowly nature who is a dog eater. You know, you use the term dog eater to only indicate that not that he physically eats dogs, but that means who is evil by nature, who is of a very low nature, of a low character, and a lowly person, an ignorant person. So whether such a jnani who has realized his true self dies in Kashi, that is Varanasi, or whether he dies in the hut of a lowly person, it doesn't matter for him. Jnana samprapti samaye muktasau vigatashaya. He is completely the smritis. The smriti says that according to it, let the jnani cast his body in Kashi, a sacred place, or in the house of a dog eater or a chandala. It is immaterial because at the time of gaining the knowledge itself, he is liberated. He has already become a liberated person. He's only carrying on the body because the body has a natural tendency and it has to live for a certain period of time and then drop off. So he is liberated, being free from all results of actions. That is what he says. Mukta asau vigatashaya, karmashaya. The repository of all his karma, all his actions are totally exhausted now, and he is liberated, having attained that this thing. This is what the Smriti. Earlier he has quoted the Shruti, the Vedas. Then he is quoting the Smriti, and therefore, according to that Smriti, he has exhausted it. All his karma is exhausted, and in accordance with this Shruti and the Smriti, he is a liberated person and he is totally free. So it doesn't matter where the body dies, the body is of no consequence. There is no need for giving too much of importance to this body. Let it drop off wherever possible. Wherever it happens, and no samskara is also needed. You need not perform rituals, rites, and do cremation, and all those things are external, and it is for those who are living. What does it matter for the dead person? The life has gone out of the body, and the body is dead, and what you do with the body is of no consequence at all. It is only for those who are living and who were associated with that person functioning through that body. If they have some reverence or regard or whatever it is, or if they have some karma bandha or the bondage of karma, it is for them to do whatever they want to do, but for others it is of no consequence. When Jiddu Krishnamurti died, he told them, please don't do anything. No rituals, no rites. You are aware that I am very particular about cleanliness. So please wash the body, wrap it in a white cloth, and burn it like a piece of wood. It's only some of his, people close to him brought some ashes to India, some to England, and some somewhere. But that's only of, as I said, it's only for the satisfaction of those people. But he said simply burn it like a log of wood. That's all. No rites, no rituals, no lamenting, no weeping, no shouting, no howling. Nothing is to be done. Simply wrap it in a white cloth and burn it like a log of wood. That too, if you want to. But once that person is gone, what you do with the body is of no consequence to anybody. So that is what is emphasized here. Kashyantu Maranan Muktihi is a statement where they say that if somebody dies in Kashi, he'll get mukti, he'll get moksha. That means whoever is born and living in Kashi and dies in Kashi should be already liberated, no? They should all get mukti. Isn't it a foolish statement? Where is that Kashi? The Kashi, the sacredness is within you. Kashi is not a physical place. Kashi is a sacred place within you. So wherever you are, that is the sacred place in which you are functioning. Let us not assume that simply because the tradition, you see, if you follow foolishly the tradition, the hundreds and hundreds of old people, they simply go and wait for their death in Kashi. Because the foolish belief. So some fellow keeps telling all these things and they think that it is true. It can't really help you. It is of the body is of the least importance and consequence. So only purification and exhaustion of karma is what is going to lead us onto the spiritual path and provides us the opportunity to cross over. You cannot cross over with the baggage of karma. You know, there is an English word called impediment. It comes from the word impedimenta. It's a Latin word which means baggage. Impedimenta, the literal meaning of that word is baggage. So any impediment, you will remain here only. Any baggage, we will be here only. All the baggage has to be thrown off. You have to jettison all the baggage, completely exhaust your karma. That itself is moksha. The exhaustion of karma can happen only through purification. And once these two are there, one is liberated from it and completely out of it. Iti Sri Shankara Bhagavat Padacharya Pranitah Tattvabodha Prakaranam Samaptam. Here, thus I'll just read out this thing we have already seen. Thus, the knower of the self, having crossed the samsara, attains the supreme bliss here itself. The Shruti affirms the knower of the self goes beyond all sorrows. Tarati Shokam Atmavit. Let the Jnani cast his body in Kashi a sacred place, or in the house of a dog eater, a Chandala, it is immaterial, because at the time of gaining that supreme realization or that intelligence, then itself he is liberated, being freed from all results of action. So assert the Smritis too. Thus ends the treatise Tattvabodha enunciated by Sri Shankara Bhagavad Padacharya. So we have, to the best of my ability, and maybe I don't know, there might be so many things which may need more elaboration or interpretation, or I might have made some mistakes here and there, but we have successfully come to the end of Tattvabodha. I see that there are some, I'll stop sharing this, and there are some questions. We can take up these questions, and in fact, actually, I should take up the question of Janaki Ramji, because he sent me a question much in advance personally. But I'll come to that question. That's a very interesting and important question. Let us complete these questions. Veena says, if we do some karma which gives us the results in this very life, do you also call it prarabdha karma? Yeah, see, as I mentioned earlier, Veena please remember this Sanchita karma, prarabdha karma, agami karma is a very simplistic way of dividing. Karma doesn't divide itself that way. It's a web of karma.
Okay.
It's a great web of karma.
Okay.
So sitting here, I don't know which is prarabdha, which is agami, which is sanchita, which is what is happening. I have absolutely no knowledge, isn't it? None of us has got any knowledge about it.
Okay.
But as I said, the point is there should be a starting point to take responsibility for one's actions, and then the purification starts. Every thought, every word, every action, if I am doing with that attention, that is the starting point for our spiritual sadhana. Okay. If we do some, okay, right. Then Sarangiji, I am a beginner. Understand, I cannot get rid of karma at the same as the same is in this. Can we do some karma which will help us achieve self-free in this very life? What is this karma nature and type? By what we could enter this Srotapanna? See, Sarangiji, kindly understand. Let us not be in a hurry to become self-realized. There is no hurry. See, we are bound by time. When we are bound by time, we are talking about a timeless dimension. The time, as we understand here, has no relationship to that. The supreme intelligence, the ultimate reality, the Brahman, the spatio-temporal framework in which we are caught, has no existence or no place in that realm or in that state of consciousness. So please don't consider yourself as a beginner or starting point. No, nobody knows. See, just because a fellow like me is talking about Tattvabodha, don't think that I am somewhere ahead. I could be much behind you. From a spiritual point of view, it doesn't make any difference. The point is the seriousness with which you approach. Don't be in a hurry to think that in this particular life I should be. See, because we are talking about a process and a state of consciousness which has no relationship to the world in which we are living. So, getting rid of karma, as I mentioned, it's not possible that way. You have to undergo and get rid of it. That is one point. Second thing is, what kind of karma is to be done, I have already mentioned. Taking full responsibility for every thought, for every word, for every action from this moment onwards. From this moment onwards. That itself will tremendously quicken the pace of our spiritual progress. So that is what is important. So it is not about the quantum or the quality. More it has to do with the intensity of one's intention and the intensity with which one applies to the the action to be taken. What is to be done from a spiritual point? Tivra samveganam asannaha. There's a sutra which says if you are tremendously intent and serious about it, it won't take even a second to become self-realized. See, the point to be, one more important thing to be understood is, sir, self-realization or liberation, technically and theoretically, is the most easiest thing on the surface of this earth. If there is anything which is the most easiest thing which can be done or achieved, is to become self-realized. Why do we don't get that? Why is it that it doesn't happen? Is not because of that, but because of the complication we have created for ourselves. I have tied up myself, sir. I have tied up myself with a rope, with a plastic this thing, then put a huge tape on it. Then I have bound myself. Then I put some chains around me, and I put all kinds of things totally binding me. Now, how do I get out of it? The getting out of it is complicated because I have bound myself. Mana eva manushyanam karanam bandha mokshayoh. Whether bandha or moksha, whether it is bondage or liberation, mind is the cause. Bandhaya vishayasaktam. If you are grossly involved in worldly affairs, you are bound. Nirvishayam muktam smruta. If you are free from that attachment, you are free, you are liberated. See, we are the ones who have bound ourselves. So the one has to become tremendously serious. And don't think in terms of this life or next life or when I'm going to be free. It's not. It is of no consequence. Lifetimes or time as such has no consequence from that point of view. It is only the intensity with which you approach it. That's all. If one is not intent, one is not serious. One does not. If one does not realize, see, as Krishnamurti, Jiddu Krishnamurti used to say, sir, your house is burning, your house is burning. He is able to see, and I am totally blind and deaf and dumb. So I don't see my house is on fire. I am comfortably sitting in the same house, burning along with it. I don't see that. For a jnani, for a realized person, he sees that, see, why is such a, why all these great saints and sages and great men are helping us? Not because of our this thing. In spite of our present situation, out of their great compassion and their vision, their perception that one is stuck. We are all bound in this sorrow, bound in this suffering. They are able to see that suffering which we are undergoing directly and then pointing out a way to us. The whole of Tattva Bodha is also basically that. The teaching of the essence of Vedanta is to tell us that you are in such an ignorant state and bound yourself. Please release yourself because nobody else can release you. Somebody else may point out that you are bound, but the releasing has to be done by us only. A realized soul is beyond space and karma is subject to. So karma is non-existent for a real. Obviously, see, karma is non-existent in the sense if he is having a body, he has to undergo the karma. That's all. Swamiji's take over your karma and says it can't be destroyed out. It doesn't work at all. See, if you give me money, I'll also take away your karma. I am short of a few $1 million. If all of you put together give me, I'll take away your karma. That's a nonsensical way of doing it. It's a great disservice people would be doing by misinterpreting the scripture. Let us not insult the scripture and the great authors of these scriptures by thinking that they are also like us. Lot of esoteric meaning is hidden in all these things. So it doesn't make any thing. Okay. 12 disciples of Sri Ramakrishna were born during it, and he knew before about all of them who established. Yeah, that's what I said. The Buddha also had this. It is said of the Buddha also that several people connected, associated with him, whose karma is to be is bound to him, they were all born at the same time in a close vicinity. Huh? And also know about Mother Sharda Devi, because for him also there was the necessity of getting married. And by association with Sri Ramakrishna, Sharada Devi also became a realized person, because they are all almost on the verge of it. As I said, they have a few more lives or a couple of lives left over, and then they are born there for this association and make it and cross over. But see, we don't know. It's only our imagination, or somebody has written stories about it. Let's not get too much enamored by them also, because see, Darvi Pakarasaniva. See, there are so many people who are associated with such great men, but everybody doesn't become a self-realized person, or everybody's karma is not so easily exhausted. How does a ladle know the taste of the soup? The ladle might have been used hundreds of times to stir the soup, but will the ladle know the taste of the soup at any time? So if a person is like that ladle, 1,000 gurus or 1,000 teachers or 1,000 sages or saints also cannot help. That makes Binaji says that makes sense, since all karma created by a realized soul will not accrue to him, has to go somewhere, since that energy put in the world cannot be destroyed, so it is added to the good karma. So yeah, it's a question of redistribution. Redistribution is that for him it is exhaustion, for them it is accumulation, for the other, for whether good or bad. Ramachandran says, Sirji, by uttering the truth and real nature of karma, you have become a bad teacher today. Absolutely. I want to be a bad teacher, and it is still 5th of September only for us. I am not a teacher in the first place, number one. Second thing is, I don't mind becoming bad. Because it doesn't make any sense by talking nonsense and thinking that people will be just realized like this. Just by somebody waving a hand or giving you something or the other, you will become realized. No, it doesn't happen that way. It's absolutely it is something which is impossible. Something which is impossible, and it cannot happen at all. One has to be very clear about these things. Otherwise, we are not progressing at all. We are missing Tattvabodha. So, Madam Manjula ji, sometime or the other things have to come to an end. Tattvabodha, yeah. See, it's not about missing about Tattvabodha. It's about how seriously we take this Tattvabodha forward and get into the true Vedanta. This is only a Prakarana Grantha. These are preliminary texts. And I mentioned earlier also that the text is only a pretext. The text is only a pretext, and one needs to become serious. That's the only thing. Gulu Advani ji, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Lucidly explained. Janaki Ramji, seriously determined. Jagran. Yeah, seriously. Yeah, one has to take it up seriously. And I'll come to the question of Janaki Ramji, which he has sent me personally in WhatsApp. He says, I have a question which you can clarify in the beginning or at the end. The goal of spirituality is transformation in word and deed in daily behavior. Absolutely right. Then is it required to keep on attending numerous webinars, reading scriptures, books, and be a member of a satsang? This is absolutely not necessary. See, these are the quantity of absorption through attending webinars, seminars, or classes, or satsangs, or reading the books and all, is a great hindrance actually. Is a great hindrance. Blavatsky, Madam Blavatsky used to say, read one sentence and ruminate on it for a week or a month if necessary. The quantum of these things, this is all we are interested, Janakiramji, to put it very bluntly, we are all interested in window shopping. And we are searching for some kind of a false self-satisfaction that I go to the School of Ancient Wisdom, I attend Tattva Bodha classes, I attend this webinar, that man talks about the same subject in a different way. You know, like going to different restaurants to taste the same food. This fellow makes this particular dish very well in this restaurant. That fellow makes it much better. And all this is a kind of illusion. And we are not seriously interested in anything spiritual. We don't want to spend time, money, energy on anything. We only do window shopping and feel happy about it. So see, that's why Adi Shankara Stotra is there, in which he says Satsangate Nissangatvam. From Satsanga, you have to go to Nissanga. You have to become totally detached. Nissangatve Nirmohatvam. You have to become totally disillusioned. Come out of delusion. Moha is delusion. Nirmohatve Nischalatatvam. Then you have to become absolutely silent. Nischala. There is absolutely no ripple. Totally calm and silent. Nischala tattve jivan muktihi. When you completely become silent, then only you become liberated. So satsangatve nissangatvam, nissangatve nirmohatvam, nirmohatve nischalatatvam, nischalatatve jivan muktihi. See, he's put it very beautifully, very simply. You can't go on satsang for years and decades and lifetimes. No, it doesn't help you. It doesn't help you. You have to take that next step. I can't be in the primary school. It is like the joke of Dennis the Menace. Dennis the Menace brings his report card and shows it to his mother, and he says, "Don't take that teacher seriously because she has been in the same class for the past 15 years. Don't take that marks and all given by that primary school teacher seriously because she has been teaching in the primary school for the past 15 years. She hasn't progressed from the primary school. So we can't be sitting in the primary school forever. We have to move on. Satsanga can help you only to a certain extent. Satsanga is for mutual sharing of experiences. You know the satsanga helps to the extent that people of the same vibration, people of the same frequency come together. Having come to a satsanga, we should go back in a much more elevated state of consciousness and an elevated state of purity. One should not fall back into the same worldly activity and get caught in that. In such a case, what happens is it becomes a weekly routine or monthly routine, or every time I need like battery charging. Every time I need to come to satsanga because it will do some charging for my battery. But when will you become the battery charger? You and I have to become the battery charger at some point of time. You have to become you can't always depend on somebody to keep on charging your battery. One has to become the battery charger. That is what is more important. So your question is very valid. These things only help to a very little extent. It is more, see, as I said, more of homework to be done. 1 hour of classwork, a 1 month of homework has to be done. So much of work is there to be done. So much of work is there to be done. So that is the purpose, and satsanga definitely helps, but only to the extent of your seriousness. To it. What do you bring to that satsanga? What do you do to this? That is more important. Some statement, Sirji, I have no words to thank you. Ramchandranji, thank you so much. I am grateful to all the participants because it's an opportunity for me also. See, as I said, it is a mutual exchange of energies. We should all be elevated through it. That is the mantra, Sahana Vavatu, Sahanau Bhunattu, Sahaviryam Karavavahe, Sahaviryam Karavavahe, Tejasvinavadhitamastu. Our study should be invigorating. Now our adhitam tejasvi astu. Our study should be invigorating, should be enlightening, should be effulgent, should give us lot of energy. Tejasvi navadhitam astu mavidvishavai. There should not be any inimical feeling or enmity in a satsanga. So there should not be any sense of competition or conflict or any disturbance, because that is going to create a problem in a satsanga. If you are coming with a great expectation that some miracle will happen, no. If you're coming with the expectation that I will get some recognition out of it or I'll get something out of it, no. And how do I approach the whole thing? With what intention I am coming? That becomes much more important. Otherwise, it will not serve the purpose. It may serve. See, like somebody going to a great, treasure house. There's a huge treasure house with so many invaluable things, and you pick up some trinkets, a coin here, a coin there, and go. What is the fun? We have the treasure house open. No, come with a truck, come with a train, train of 100 bogies. So that you can take as much as you want, because it's infinite. So if I come to that ocean of nectar, Amrita, with a small tumbler, I'll take only that much. So the whole treasure house is open to us. Now it is for us to take benefit of that. And without taking benefit of that, sometimes we totally ignore it also and then go away from it. We don't even want to enter the treasure house. Vijay Lakshmi ji, so well explained, sir. Really appreciate your comment. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, madam. Thank you. No, I just wanted to, I have another 5 minutes is there, isn't it? So I just wanted to mention about one important thing, because these are, as I said, this Prakarana Grantha is there, but this is for our study of actual Vedanta. The Vedanta, the principal, sources are three. The canonical, the works which are given are the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, and the Bhagavad Gita. These are called as Prasthanatraya, the three great canonical works from the point of view of Vedanta. We have done Bhagavad Gita in the School of Ancient Wisdom. We have done that, and several of the participants have attended it also. In that context, I wanted to make some important observations for our study. See, we will elaborate this on some other occasion, but I just want to make a mention of this because I thought that it is relevant having studied the Tattva Bodha. The Bhagavad Gita and the commentary of Adi Shankara talk about several aspects which are very important. I have selected 7 important aspects from that. One is pravrutti and nivrutti. Pravrutti is the path of acquisition. Nivrutti is the path of renunciation. So from the Bhagavad Gita, what is it that we derive has to be determined. One has to determine for oneself whether one is on the pravrutti marga or the nivrutti marga. Am I continuing to be acquisitive and involved in acquiring more and more and more of worldly things, or am I on the path of renunciation? This is a very important aspect which at the very beginning in the commentary he stresses upon it, because it gives you both. The Bhagavad Gita gives you a guidance to both. Then the second one, related to this pravrutti and nivrutti, he talks about abhyudaya and nishreyasa. Abhyudaya means prosperity, growth, development, rising up. Abhyudaya means rising up. And Nishreyasa. Nishreyasa is becoming liberated, free, emancipation. So if you are on the Pravritti Marga, you are pursuing Abhyudaya from a worldly point of view. But if you are on the Nivritti Marga, you are oriented towards emancipation, liberation, freedom, moksha, nirvana, or whatever you call it as. That is the Nishreyasa. Again, the Bhagavad Gita talks about both. Right? Then the third one is it talks about Swabhava and Swadharma. One needs to understand what is one's Swabhava and what is one's Swadharma. This also, the Bhagavad Gita gives a lot of indications to the understanding of our own Swabhava and Swadharma. Then the fourth point is Avidya and Karma, how they are bound, how ignorance and karma, the bondage of action, how they are very closely related and how we need to come out of that. Once you are oriented towards Vidya, you become free from karma. The avidya and karma, these are the two other important aspects which are emphasized in the Bhagavad Gita. Then we will come to the fifth one, which is a very interesting thing, again related to avidya and karma, which is shoka and moha, sorrow and delusion. Avidya and karma will put us in shoka and moha, sorrow and delusion. Sorrow and delusion are the most important things. Again, shoka and moha, shoka and moha. This is what the Bhagavad Gita and the Bhashya very clearly talk about. Then he talks about Sankhya and Karma. Sankhya is not the Sankhya philosophy part of it. Sankhya refers to the Jnana Yoga part of it. Sankhya Buddhi refers to that Jnana part of it, which I have elaborated earlier, which we can discuss later. I'm just making a few tips mentioning here to seriously study the subject. So Sankhya and Karma, how very clearly the Bhagavad Gita says that karma is for Atma Shuddhi. Karma is for purification. All actions are meant for purification. And Sankhya Buddhi or Sankhya Yoga is the Jnana Yoga, which is going to remove the Ajnana, which is the removal of all ignorance. Then once that is done, you are totally surrendered to him and he will take care of your yoga and kshema. Yoga and kshema is the seventh dimension of that. He says, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye janah paryupasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yoga kshemam vahamyaham. We are doing the 9th chapter. This is, I think, the 22nd or 23rd verse in the 9th chapter, which we have covered recently in another context. He talks about yoga and kshema. Whatever you want and whatever you have, both the things are taken care of by him, provided you surrender yourself totally to him. And you do not think of anything other than him. Your whole consciousness is filled with the presence of that divine, that divinity which Sri Krishna represents. So he will take care of your yoga and kshema. You see the beauty of these 7 dimensions? Is beautifully, he talks about pravritti and nivritti. Related to that is abhyudaya and nishreyasa. Then he talks about swadharma and swabhava and swadharma. Then avidya and karma. Related to that is Shoka and Moha, then the Sankhya and Karma Yoga, this thing, and finally about Yoga and Kshema. He will take care of it. Therefore, finally he says, Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam braja aham tva sarva papebhyo mokshayishyami ma shucha. Once you give up all dharmas and seek refuge in me, that state comes into being only when you have highly progressed on the spiritual path. It is not as though that suddenly it will come to you. It's not sudden this thing, but there is a quantum leap. The intent, the seriousness, the intensity, there is definitely there is this possibility of taking a quantum leap. And that quantum leap from the spatio-temporal framework into the timeless dimension of that supreme intelligence. Then there is one more this thing. Dr. Sana, it is the most highlighting point on the occasion of teachers yesterday that do not take words of teachers seriously because of stagnation. Is all stagnant, always looking for inputs from outside, always without much of reflection. Yeah, Anubhuti and Anusthana, absolutely right. You have to have that experience and that firm conviction of action. Anusthana means to be firmly established in that state. It also means being established in practice. That is very, very important. And I thank Dr. Sana for his very useful input. Any further questions? If not, I think we have already exceeded the 1.5 hours. It's more, we have crossed that 1.5 hours time limit also. If there are no more questions, we will close this session here. Thank you for all. Thank you to
Krishna
all the
Paniji,
participants. Next, can you give me a couple of days time for two reasons? One is that because I am in the US, I don't have access to my library. See, my library is in Hyderabad. I couldn't bring many books here. So that is one thing. Second thing is I need a couple of days time to think over and decide what we are going to take up in the next week program. So we will announce it in a couple of days, mostly maybe by Tuesday or so. I should be able to come up with the next program. What is the topic of the next Sunday? The next Sunday, which topic we are going to take up? That we will just give me a couple of days time, Binaji. I'll let you know, and you can inform me.
Basically, they should all know that we are meeting at the same time next Sunday at 10 p.m.
Yes.
10 a.m.
Yes.
Sorry.
Yes.
And so the topic we will announce, but we will be meeting. Right.
Yes. And I have one small request to all the participants. Let us join at least 5 minutes before time. This is a humble request. See, when we started, we were only half of them were there, or less than half. It's not the question of missing out on something, because these are recorded and they will be given to you. But if we are, one of the basic disciplines on the spiritual path is adherence to time. So let's start on time. Though we are giving a 5 minutes grace, still I would prefer that if the participants can come on time and join here, I'd be very grateful, because it will facilitate the organizers also. Okay.
Yeah, we can start on time. That would be great.
Thank you so much.
Krishna Paniji, for a beautiful exposition on the Tattva Bodha. Beautifully explained. And, we realize now the importance of not just reading and, beyond whatever you tell us from the text, there's a lot of pressure on us to actually think about these things, reflect on it, and transform. So thank you so much for that, for putting that on us. Thank you very much. I'll call Sajini now to give the vote of thanks officially and to close the session. Sajini?
With Loka Samastas.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Krishnapani ji. This was really wonderful going through this text. And Tattva Bodh, you can go on to the Atma Bodh. Would that be possible?
Yeah, as I said, I don't have ready access to that here, but I'll see online availability of it, and then I need to do some preparatory work also, maybe some slides and all. I'll certainly try to do it, but I hope you'll also give me some option to, if not Atmabodha, some other subject which is readily, easier for me to access. If that can help also, I will suggest. I'll certainly take care of your suggestion. I'll certainly
We could
consider.
do some of the Upanishads.
No, Upanishads are.
Some Upanishads.
Let us see. Let us see, madam. Let me see. See, the Upanishadic texts also are, are not readily available, and there's this time difference is there, and I am here immensely enjoying my time with my grandson. So, so it's a question of, preparing for it. I'll certainly do, and I have some other topics are available. Let me see, and I'll get back. Just give me a couple of days time. Sorry, Meena Nirulaji.
Yeah.
I think you can do the Loka Samastha. I think Sajni ji has some problem with her internet due to
Yeah.
low bandwidth or computer conditions. It says, please.
So let's sit erect and thank the God, the Lord above, and you, Krishnapani ji, for everything that you're doing for us. We are really happy to do this text, and it was a great moment for us. And Swasti Prajabhya Paripalayantam Nyayena Marge Brahmane Samastaloka Sukhino Bhavantu Samastaloka Sukhino Bhavantu Samastaloka Sukhino Bhavantu. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om. Shri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om.